What's up again, everybody? It's another day, it's another time to go through a bunch of cards and assign arbitrary rankings to them that most certainly matter to some people, probably. Alright, we're gonna do Warrior today. Yesterday we did Ninja, and Ninja had some really great cards, some fantastic pieces. There were a lot of comments that said Ninja got some really good cards, and I totally agreed with him. So let's see how Warrior is faring. Spoiler alert. One of my favorite cards coming up in this one. One of my favorites. Helm of Sharp Eye. We're going to start with that one because that is the Majestic equipment. It is the Warrior Head equipment. Blocks for 1 and then has Battle Worn, so it sticks around after it blocks until you use the effect, which says attack reaction, pay 1 resource, destroy Helm of Sharp Eye, and then banish the top card of your deck. You can play it this combat chain. Activate this ability only if you control a weapon with attack greater than twice its base. So on the surface, when you look at this, you're like, wow, that's a really cool effect. But for me, the more I dove deeper into how this effect works, the more I realized that the ability to use this, the window in which this is useful, kind of narrows a little bit. So let's get into the specifics. First of all, this is an attack reaction effect, so you use this in reaction to, you know, an attack that you play or a sword attack that you make, things like that, right? Or an axe attack, I should say, as well. You destroy this so you can use it once, and then you banish the top card of your deck. Now, if you banish the top card of your deck, and of course this is all, you know, because you met the requirement of the attack greater than twice its base attack for your weapon, but if you banish the top card of your deck and it's an attack reaction, sweet, you can play it on top of the, you know, attack that you're making. If it's a weapon attack and you get a really powerful weapon like attack reaction, then great, it makes sense, it's in Warrior, right? If you banish an attack action card, that's pretty good because you can play it on the combat chain. You know, you wrap up what you're attacking with, you can then continue the combat chain by playing an attack action. If you get an instant, you can technically play that on the combat chain as well, or just in response to all of this that's happening, I believe. But if you get a non-attack action card, you can't play it. You just can't play it because you can't play a non-attack action card on the combat chain. Playing a non-attack action card breaks the combat chain and starts a new chain. So if you banish a non-attack, you can't actually play it out, which is really kind of a bummer because if you think about the way you construct a Warrior deck, you play a lot of non-attacks. Just about every Warrior deck, you play a lot of non-attacks. Now, there are some good decks that this goes into, like specifically you could put this very comfortably into Boltyn, and it makes sense most in Boltyn because you look at the last thing, which is another narrowing aspect of where you play this, and that's activate this ability only if you control a weapon with attack greater than twice its base. So if you try to do that with Dawnblade and you're playing as Dorinthia, you would have to buff it by the Dawnblade, that is, by 4. Because the attack has to be greater than twice its base, right? So Dawnblade's normally 3. If you play a 3 attack reaction, you know, that buffs for 3, you would have to then buff it 1 more time in order to crack Helm of Sharp Eye, banish the top card, and then possibly play that. So it doesn't make much sense for Dawnblade because that's kind of tricky. It's definitely trickier than you would want normally. But it makes a ton of sense in Boltyn if you're playing Raiden. If you're playing Raiden Boltyn, Raiden Duskbane, and then like just playing Boltyn on top of that, then it makes a ton of sense because any buff to Raiden is more than twice its base. Just it even says that on the release notes. So this is where this card fits in. And it means you can also probably top deck like an attack reaction or an attack action and play it. So in exactly Boltyn, it makes a ton of sense. You can also play this in Kasai because if you're playing with the Centauri Sabers that attack for 2 and then you give them a +3 buff, then you can come on top of that. But I will say this, that doesn't sound and feel very good because she plays a ton of non-attack action cards. So does Dorinthia, and that leads us back to this is really just a Boltyn card, and because it's just a Boltyn card, I'm thinking that this is more of like a 2-star card. So that's where I'm putting it. For me personally, this sits at 2-star. That I felt like we had to go through the entire explanation just for you to understand where I'm coming from. Let me know in a comment below if that is incorrect. Put it down there what you would rate this card, because I bet you some people are going to disagree with me on this one, but for me it feels a little bit less than ideal. Shatter. Shatter is a 0-cost yellow pitch warrior attack reaction, blocks for 3. It says until the end of the turn, target two-handed weapon gains whenever this would deal attack damage. Instead, you may destroy a defending equipment with defense less than the damage that would be dealt this way, which is cool. It's a spicy card. This is a really interesting card because I feel like you could punish in like Dorinthia using the two-handed sword. You could punish with Dorinthia's Dawnblade. Your opponent is just like, you know, you attack for 3 and then your opponent's like, oh, it's fine, I'll block for 3, and then you attack react and give it +3, and they're like, okay, cool, I'll take 3, and then you're like, shatter, lose your Fjendal Spring Tunic, and they're like, no. That is really interesting. You could play this in exactly that. If you're also playing Raiden Duskbane, this is usable in that as well. You know, you attack for like 3 with Raiden, and they block, and then you attack react with something, and then you just come in with Shatter. Exactly the same line of play. This is an interesting card. I will say it does feel a little bit more limited, but it also reminds me of some of those cards that I undervalued in Tales of Aria, like Exposed to the Elements, that like can destroy equipment. And so I don't want to undervalue this one, so I'm giving it a 3-star. And I do think that if they print more warrior two-handed weapons in the future, this card could be incredibly spicy going forward. This is one of those cards that I feel like could gain a lot of traction based on future cards printed. Blood on Her Hands. This card is bad. It's a bad card. Don't play it. Then we have Oath of Steel. I'm just kidding about this card. This card's incredible. It's easily a 5-star. It's one of my favorite cards, but it's not the one I was talking about earlier, believe it or not. This card is incredible. It does exactly what you want to do with Kasai. I made a video on this card because this was my spoiler card. It's a 6-star card, and the video that I made perfectly encapsulates my feelings on it. There's a lot of slashing. That's exactly how I feel about this card. There's a lot of slashing. It's a 5-star. I gotta give it a 5-star. Look, you don't even need to max this out. You can just play it for 4 coppers. Just pick a couple of modes. You can double stack the +1s onto one weapon, give that go again, give that attack twice on a turn, and you can just go super wide with this plus the other saber, plus like maybe an attack or some non-attack actions that buff things up. Heck, you could play like the attack reaction that's super broken, you know, the one we're going to talk about here in a moment. This card is so flexible. It's the reason you want to play Kasai again. And if you stopped playing Kasai, now it's a reason you want to come back to playing Kasai. You don't just have Cashin as that like huge bomb turn card. Now you have Blood on Her Hands as well. This card's incredible. Just go watch the video I made. Just go watch that video. Oath of Steel. I'm not super crazy on Oath of Steel. It costs 0, it's a majestic, it blocks for 3. It says whenever you attack with a weapon this turn, put a +1 counter on it. At the beginning of your end phase, remove all +1 counters from weapons you control and then go again. So I was trying to think of like good use case scenarios for this. Like let's just talk Dorinthia and Dawnblade. Let's say you're just with Dorinthia, you're playing the Dawnblade. It has 1 counter on it. Okay, that's pretty good so far. People allowing you to have 1 counter, you take that, right? If you could say I want 1 counter on my Dawnblade, great. Okay, so then you attack. Well, you play Oath of Steel, and then you attack. You're attacking for 5 because it has 2 counters on it. After you attack with this, after Oath of Steel, of course, and your opponent's like, "Oh, this is really tough to deal with," and then you go for 6, and like you're pushing huge damage, but this is really only adding 1 or 2 to an attack. Now, yes, you could like Twinning Blade and maybe push 3 times with Dawnblade, but the worst part is all of your counters go away at the end of your turn, including the one that you gained or including the one that you should gain on that turn. It just resets. And so for me, this is like not great. Now, if you got really fancy and you played 2 of these on a turn, then I think we have something to talk about, because then you're getting like huge blowout kind of turns. Now, if you're thinking not Dawnblade related and you want to just go with like a Centauri Saber for either of the other 2 heroes, or even if you wanted to play Saber on Dorinthia, if you want to play Dorinthia Sabers, then you can get a little bit interesting with that as well. But again, when you're splitting the swords up and they can't stack the counters, this card feels like it would be better if paired with something that can actually buff the weapon further, or can give more attacks available to it. So like, I don't know, pair it with Blood on Her Hands and then it feels really good. But by itself in a box, in a vacuum, it doesn't feel great. For me, this is more of a 2-star card than anything else. I feel like it does get better if you include more things around it. Perhaps I should be evaluating it with more things around it, but I will say I don't really evaluate the other cards, or I haven't really evaluated the other cards specifically with synergies in mind, you know, adding up like extra layers. So I feel like it would be disingenuous to do the same thing with Oath of Steel, because of course all cards will get better with synergy. That's the point of synergy, and that's oftentimes the point of card games. This will get better if you combine it with other things, or if you stack it onto itself. You could say the same thing about Blood on Her Hands and all of these cards. So for me, this sits at a 2-star card for right now. Let me know if you disagree in a comment below. I'd love to hear your feedback. Honestly, I want to say this. All the comments that I've gotten on all of these videos thus far are thoroughly enjoyable to listen to, read, watch, and respond to. So keep them coming. Let me know why you think this card is nuts, or why you think it's not so great. Let me know. I want to know. Slice and Dice, this card is really good in my opinion. Slice and Dice costs 0. It says whenever you attack with a sword or dagger this turn, if it's your first weapon attack and you're playing the red here, it gets +1. If you're playing the yellow, it gets +1. If you're playing the blue, it gets +1. And then if it's your second weapon attack this turn, it gets either +3, +2, or +1. So it's like combining Hit and Run without giving Go Again, which is arguably the best part of Hit and Run. You're getting the buff off this. It's like playing Sharpened Steel, but then it's also giving a buff to your first weapon swing. There's a lot of like goodness wrapped up in this card, and it always feels good to play this card. Even if you're not playing it for actual value, you're still blocking for 3 with this, and you can run a full cycle of this, or run the reds and the yellows, or the reds and the blues for the pitch. All of it feels good, and at the very bottom tier is the blue that buffs for 1 and then 1, which again, if you're looking at sabers or axes, that's pushing 3 and 3, and if you're talking sabers, that's pushing 3 or maybe 4 if they block with an attack action card, or 3 or maybe 4. So even the blue has utility, and it makes blocking uncomfortable. The red feels incredible because it pushes a saber to 3, and then it pushes your second saber to 6, or to 5. I should say 5, and then possibly 6, depending on how they block. So that is incredibly good. This card, I give a solid 4 stars. It is like just on the cusp of being uber nuts. I feel like I'm going to be playing this card a ton in any variety of, two-handed weapon warrior. Just straight up. I don't know if I would play this in Dorinthia as much, but it does have utility in Dorinthia because you do plan on attacking twice. You do have to rely on your opponent to kind of let you attack twice, so it's less utilitarian. You use it less in that deck. But in the other two, it's like a shoe-in. It's like straight up, man. Now we come to the best card in Warrior. It's so crazy that this is the best card in Warrior, but I think that this is the best card in Warrior. I think this is uber nuts and totally underrated, but I think people have found out that it is super, super solid. Blade Runner cost 1. It's an attack reaction. It blocks for 3, and it gives Go Again, so it's like Glint the Quicksilver. You don't draw a card on it, though, but you don't even need them to block with a card from hand to trigger the next part, and the next part's bonkers. It says your next weapon attack this turn gains +3. It's Glint the Quicksilver, or Hit and Run, but it's more Glint the Quicksilver because it's an attack reaction. That plus Sharpened Steel. It's like they just put it together. That makes it incredible. This card is so good. This is probably the best Warrior card that Warrior got, period. I mean, it's probably just the best Warrior card in a long time. I mean, I don't want to say it's better than Blood on Her Hands because, like, that's my card, man. But this card's incredible. It's super good. It plays in everything except Dawnblade, of course. It's just incredibly, incredibly good. You always play this if you're playing anything but Dawnblade. I have to give this a 5-star. It's weird. I know it's a common, but I feel like this just becomes that hit and run slot. Like, you could technically swap out hit and runs for this card and you'd be happy, because hit and run has the conditional effect of possibly sometimes giving a buff, and this one just almost always, well, it just always gives a buff because you're giving go again and then you are buffing up your next attack. This card's incredible. It's 5 stars. In the Swing costs nothing, and it blocks for 3, and it says you have to play this only if you've attacked 2 or more times with weapons this turn. Target weapon attack gains +3. It doesn't feel as good as the art looks, and I just want to say that it doesn't feel as good as the art looks. It is a little bit more fringe usefulness. I feel like you could just straight up run like Iron Song Response and you'd be okay. Like, Iron Song Response Red does the same exact thing, but you do have the stipulation they have to block with cards from hand. In this case, it does make a little bit more sense to run it in like a Kasai or like a Sabers build, because you are going to be just incentivized to swing twice, and this card can come in for 3 at the end. But oftentimes I feel like in a Sabers build, your opponent's going to block out something, and so you have the same utility with Iron Song Response without the drawback of you know, having to attack twice. You could still play an Iron Song Response on like a 1 Saber turn. So for me, this one's a 2-star card, but I have seen people play it in like some early gameplay footage already. Maybe they're trying it out. Maybe they just believe in the card. Let me know what you think about this card in a comment below. Right now, I think it's sitting at a 2-star card, but I will honestly put it in decks and try it out just to like fully test it, as it should be. And Outland Skirmish, a card custom made for Kasai. It is a 0-cost common that blocks for 3. It's an action. It says your next one-handed weapon attack this turn gains +3. The next time a weapon attack hits this turn, you create a copper token and go again. It's a solid 3-star card for me. I am playing this. I should even just say it that way. I am playing this in Kasai currently. I'm playing the reds. I'm thinking about the yellows as well because of the +2 makes it really nice with Centauri Sabers. But for me, this does seem like a shoe-in for Kasai. I don't necessarily want to play it in the others, so maybe overall it should be more like a 2-star card. It's more fringe or more specific to one hero. You can, I guess, I guess you could take advantage of this if you put cash-ins in your deck. As like Bolton or Dorinthia, but I'm not sure you necessarily want to do that. Either way, I think it's either a 2 as a general rule or a 3 for Kasai. This one definitely does get better in Kasai, and it's like something you would definitely want to run because it just pushes your copper count way up, and that's cool. Also, I want to point out the little quote on the bottom literally is from Kasai. It says, Volkai, Drakai, it's all the same to me. She's saying that right as she's about to slaughter some more dudes. Super, super solid. Overall, I like a lot of the stuff that Warrior got. I think a lot of those are super solid cards, and they may not be super flashy, but they just ride that line of being totally solid, totally playable, a couple of them being way super strong. Unfortunately, I don't think the Helm of Sharp Eye is as strong as, probably other equipments that we've seen thus far, but don't let that get you down. It's a beautiful looking card, and there are some fantastic Warrior cards. If you enjoyed this video or if you learned something, if you agree with some of these things, don't forget you can always make a number go to another number. Making numbers go to numbers is what the world runs on, and if you want to help the world run, specifically this YouTube channel, run further, you can do that thing, and I would be very appreciative of it. As always, everybody, thanks for watching.